Couple reminders. We covered all of the events coming up this week, coming up tomorrow and on Thursday, open hack during class time. I forgot to mention that next week is our first in-person week since all the way back to the beginning of the program. So it is not a requirement to come in person, but it is highly, highly encouraged that you do come in person. On Monday, we have a representative from the Office of Information Technology from the state. I will have details for you guys tomorrow on where that room number will be. And then after their presentation, we'll go over to our other classroom. And then we will be in person Tuesday and Wednesday that week. And then Thursday, we're taking off for Rock on Tech. So next week, if you can make it in person, that is great. We encourage you. If you can't, it's no big deal. We'll still have the Zoom room set up, but highly, highly encouraged to be in person. That will be our final week of JavaScript. So hoping to see as many of you guys in person as possible. That will be on Lemoyne's campus, and I will confirm room numbers for you tomorrow and get you more details from there. Because I ranted for so long yesterday, I did not give Mel a chance to share his thoughts on where he was at when he was going through the program at week 9. So I'm going to pass the microphone, so to speak, over to him and give him a chance to just recap and share some experiences of where he was at.
Oh, very nice. Thank you, Max. Week 9, I think I remember initially being excited because JavaScript, it makes you finally feel like a programmer. Especially when you start seeing the projects that you're doing come to life. I think towards the end of JavaScript, I started growing my confidence, and just writing the code, as well as reading the code as well. But obviously being in a boot camp with life happening, there's still a little bit of a slight apprehension for what's next, just because like the concepts can get pretty complex. So I do think now is a good time to ask, all your clarifying questions and, make sure you really understanding every single line of code. And just with that, I'm here to help, and reach out if you need help.
Thank you, Mel. Anyone have questions? Anything pop up yesterday that we wanted to ask? Anyone have a light bulb moment? Okay, if that's the case, what did we learn yesterday? Did we see any new concepts? Did we practice anything that made a lot of sense?
Adding another page.
We added another page, the first time that we've done a multi-page app, right? And that's really important because oftentimes our projects are going to be multiple pages. So we saw how a simple A tag could take us over there. And we started getting into a little bit of JavaScript to make that work. What else did we see yesterday?
Pulling in the values from an object.
Yeah, we saw for the first time, instead of going document get element by ID and pulling the value out of that, instead we put the event on a form element, right? And we said, okay, instead of doing an on click on the button, we're going to do a on submit. And in that on submit, we're able to pull out all the different elements that are inside of that form. And because of that, we're able to get access to the value of each one of them. We also saw the event prevent default, right? Whenever we're working with a submission of a form, the browser is trying to be a little bit more helpful than usual, right? It's trying to send that information to the server for us. And we're like, hold up, we don't want it to go to the server. So whenever you're working with a form and you see that form just refresh, that can be a sign of, hey, I need to event prevent default here so I get more control over that. We saw how we did the on submit and what triggered that whole event refresh thing going on. And then we also saw date.time for the first time, and that generated out some weird timestamp, right? And some number of, it's actually milliseconds since 1970, which is a really weird date to pick, but that is called the epoch, right? Is the EPOCH, that is the time that they chose to revolve all dates around in JavaScript. So we're going to see how we use that a little bit more, how we can convert it to a readable date format, and then also how we can open up specific posts using that as somewhat of a unique ID. So we're going to get into all of that tonight. We also got in the good habit of creating a README, right? And we're going to be going back to that README and adding more information to it at the end of the project to say, hey, if I were to put this up on my portfolio and someone were to look at this project, where would they go? That README is the starting point for our documentation, right? Most people, when they download a project for the first time, there are only two places they go to start, either index.html or the README. And that README is the chance to convey in English everything that you set all out to do in that project, what got accomplished, all of that good stuff. So README, very good practice at the beginning of every project to just document a little bit. And then when you get to the end of that project, important to go back to it and type in some lessons that you've learned there. Think about how someone else could start the project. Think about what you want to work on next. All of that is really good to capture in the README. Was there anything else from yesterday that stood out? Okay, well, we can dive into where we left off yesterday. Friendly reminder to everyone that cameras on is a requirement for attendance. So if you shot me a Slack message before, not a big deal, but we definitely want to see cameras on as much as possible, just to see that level of engagement, see when you're frustrated. All of that stuff is really, really helpful to me as a teacher. So if you, like I said, if you messaged me before class and had a reason not to turn it on, no big deal. Outside of that, please try and have cameras on as much as possible. Really helps with my teaching and making sure that you guys are getting the feedback and making sure that all of this is sinking in. It's kind of like talking to a brick wall, you know. I think I'm a good teacher, but being able to see expressions on your guys' faces is what makes this virtual teaching possible. With all of that said, I know a lot of you guys like in-person classes as well. So we'll have a week of that to finish up our JavaScript next week. We also have 2 guest speakers next week. The person from the office, the State Office of Information Technology. And then I believe Jay Balunis is scheduled to do a talk on open source software as well. That is next Wednesday. I want to double check to confirm, but I'm pretty sure that is next Wednesday. So some good guest speakers coming your way. Oh, no, sorry. Jay isn't until our next in-person week 15. So scratch that. However, we do have the person from the Office of Information Technology from the state coming in, so that is coming up. So all of that said, let's dive into our code. So I'm headed to my code. I'm headed to my week 9. I'm going to right-click and duplicate my day 1 as my day 2. I'm going to take my day 2 and pop that open in VS Code. I will start a live share with y'all. Paste that in there. I am going to go live. These are always my favorite days when we don't have to start over from scratch. We can just pick up where we left off. I'm going to open up my new post and my script.html. And I'm going to throw the script down in the bottom half of my screen. And I am going to make sure that when I go to new post and inspect, when I type A, B, and C in and hit create post in my console, I should have that object logging out with what I typed in and the timestamp. If you do not have that logging out, go ahead and raise your hand for help. The other thing I'm going to do is check my code into Git, which I realized I forgot to do. And that way you can reference that code if you would rather use my code as a starting point instead of your own code. I am going to make sure that that is up on GitHub, and I will drop a link to that right now. If your own code is not working and you would like to reference mine, I just dropped a link in the chat to my copy of the code. So you can use that. That won't live update, but that's just yesterday's code as a good starting point. All right, we ready to dive in here? Okay, so what are we looking at here? We started our JavaScript, and I always like to start with a little review, right? So we put our different form fields in here. We gave them all different IDs. Now what we're using is those IDs, title, content, and author, to pull that information out of the input fields on the create post. Well, how do we bridge the gap between our JavaScript and our HTML? We put this on submit up here with the create post. And because our JavaScript is linked down here in the script.js, it now knows to come down and run this create post function. Okay, what do? We event prevent default just to make sure that that form doesn't refresh the page, try and send something to a server that doesn't exist. Then we come down here and we started this object. Why did we use an object? 2 reasons. One was to use dot notation. So we wanted to be able, when we're accessing the data out from this post, we wanted to do a title, a content, and author instead of 0, 1, 2, which might not make sense. We wanted to be able to have those keys. So because we have the keys, we can use the dot notation. Why else did we use an object? Or let me put it like this. Why wouldn't we just put each one of those in their own variable?
So we don't have to repeat the code over and over?
Not necessarily about repeating the code. It's more about grouping them all together, right? Because what we're going to end up with is several posts. And the title, the content, the author, and the timestamp, they are all related to one post together. So I want to put all 4 of those pieces of information into one variable. If I ended up making 4 different variables for them, then how do I keep track of all 4 of those variables when we have multiple posts? Does this title match up with this content or some other content? That's going to get a little hairy to manage unless we take this key value pairs, and we have 4 of them. We're keeping a lot of information in there, but the point of the object is to kind of group all 4 of those together so that when we're accessing that data, we know that the post.title, content, author, and timestamp are all about that one post that we're working on. We're going to see how that works in 1 second. But we run into a problem that we've never really had before. And the problem that we're going to run into is this post is inside my new post.html. And I could create some array up here, right? That's keeping track of the posts. But the problem that we're going to run into is what happens when you refresh the page. Well, just like our to-do list and the movie seats, as soon as you refresh the page, that data disappears, right? And we're like, all right, well, we haven't quite learned about databases yet. We don't quite know how to make an API call or how to store this on the server, but there is kind of a half step, and that is called local storage. So what we're going to do is use local storage for the first time. We're going to say window.local storage. Window is kind of like mass and date. It is something that is built into the JavaScript. The window here actually means the window of the browser that we're working in. So window is what we call a global variable. It's something that's just built into JavaScript. And now all modern browsers do support local storage. So that's a feature that we can kind of use right out of the gate. So I'm going to say window.local storage. And what I want to do is I'm going to set an item into the local storage. And this is where the VS Code is actually helping us out, right? It's showing us this documentation with the key value, and it's saying, all right, whatever the first parameter is that we put in here is the key. So local storage kind of works like an object itself. We store it in a key, and then when we get that value out, we still use that key to get the value of that key. So how does that work in practice? Well, I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to set in my post. And what do I want to set into my post? I want to set in the post variable that I just created up here, that object that we put everything in. We are also going to use window in a new way. We're going to say, hey, after you set that location, after you set that post into local storage, set the location of the window back to an empty slash. That slash is going to take us back to the home page. So I come back over. I'm actually going to type something in because we're saving the information. I'm going to say first post, some cool content. I'm the author of it. I hit create post, and look what it does. It takes us back to our homepage. Now, still, my first post, that's not the tagline or any of the content that I created. The card titles aren't lining up. It's not pulling anything out of storage yet. So how do we really know if that worked? Well, it turns out the console doesn't only have to show code that we write and run in the browser. We can actually write code in there and just test it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come down to my console, right-click inspect. If you don't have it open, go to my console tab, and I'm going to say window.local storage. And if we use set item to put something in local storage, it makes sense to use get item to get an item out of local storage. And what do I want to get out? I want to get out the post. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter on that. And what do I get? Object. Well, object isn't really describing my post now, is it? What should be in my post is title, content, author, and timestamp. And I put all of that in an object, but why can I not see that object here? Well, it turns out that local storage is really dumb and can only store strings. And so what ended up happening here is that that object went into local storage, and it was like, I can't store key value pairs. That's too complicated for me. So I'm just going to say you stored an object in local storage. And we're like, no, we don't care about the object. We care about the data that's inside the object. Local storage is like, sorry, don't know how to handle an object. Tough shit. So it's like, all right, you want to play hard? Let's play hard. What we can do is we can convert our object into a string. And then when we are on our home page, we can convert that string back to an object. In order to do that, we use object notation, and that object notation is representing a JavaScript object. So it is called JavaScript object notation, or JSON. You may have seen JSON before with API calls. This is kind of where JSON shines, because it turns out that much like local storage, the internet is really bad at transmitting complex data. And complex data can be as simple as a key value pair. And so what we do is we use JavaScript object notation to convert our data between a string, which the internet is actually really good at transmitting, and the data itself that that object represents. So let's dive into that. We are going to, instead of setting our item and putting in this post, we are going to say post as string equals JSON. And how do we get it into a string? We stringify it. And we're going to stringify our post. Then I'm going to take my post as string and put that in local storage instead. This string item is the key that we're storing in the local storage. So because we're using the same key here to get out the post, this string and this string have to match. So there can be multiple items in local storage, and we store all of those items with a particular key. It's almost like the variable name of that item in local storage.
Oh, the JSON stringify is translating basically our code into like all the strings, like just words.
So let's see what that looks like. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Yes, you're right. I'm going to go to new post. I'm going to say some fancy content, some fancy title, really fancy content, and I don't know, the king wrote it. So I'm going to go ahead and hit create post on that, and nothing looks different initially. But if I come down and I get my item out of local storage, look what I get outside of that. It doesn't just say object anymore. It looks like an object because we've got curly braces. But wait a second, what's going on? Why are our keys in quotes? Well, it turns out that JavaScript object notation and JavaScript objects, while they are very similar, they are not the same thing. JavaScript object notation, even though object is in the freaking name of it, is a string. And we use JavaScript object notation, JSON, to convert between a string and a real life object. We made the real life object here, but because local storage can't hold onto an object, we use JSON to convert our object into a string. Then we store that string into our local storage under a key called post. That means that even though I'm not on my new post page, I am able to go back to my local storage and get out an item on an entirely separate page, but now it is in a string. Okay. So that's kind of cool because we just bridge the gap between data on multiple pages, and I can prove that that data is getting saved and I can get it out on this page. What do we think the next step is?
Make a post out of it, like in our HTML.
Yeah, we've got all of this stuff down here. Wouldn't it be nice if this could show up for the end user in the interface we already built? So I'm going to head back over to my index.html, and I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to say, hey, I've got this script.js down here. And that's linking to this script file, but now I'm running into an issue. All of this create post stuff is about the new post page. I want to put some JavaScript in here that has nothing to do with create post. Well, I could come down here and put it down here at the bottom, but then that JavaScript's going to run whenever the new post page loads. So maybe script isn't the best name for the code we created. Let's rename our script.js to new post.js. Whenever we rename a file, we also want to make sure that in our new post.html, in our script tag, we also update that name. Now we are separating out our JavaScript so that it is related to that particular page. You can do this same exact approach with a style sheet. you can make a separate CSS style sheet for every page you create. And that way that CSS is only going to apply to the styling that you link to. So I'm going to go back to my index.html and I am going to make an index.js. I'm going to throw that down at the bottom. And I'm going to change in my index.html, my script.js to index.js. So 4 things we did there. We renamed our script.js to new post.js. We updated in our new post.html our script src tag to new post.js. We went to we created a new file called index.js. And we updated our index.html to link to the index.js instead of the script.js. Kenny, did that cover everything?
Yeah, I just gotta. Yeah, so you basically just made new files, right? Index.js, new post.js, and just link them to the respective HTMLs.
The only difference is I didn't create new posts from scratch. New post is renamed. We renamed our script.js to new post.js.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Ali, it really depends. It's a good question. She asked in the chat, is it better to use separate CSS pages for each HTML page, but one JS page for all? It really depends. If you are, it's actually very common to see both. To see something like app.css that is included on every single page, and then have the new page.css with the CSS only applying to that new page.css. So it really depends on how complex your page is and how likely you are to reuse either that CSS or that JavaScript across multiple pages. So if you're writing a JavaScript function that, for example, handles the contact form that's in your footer, and that footer is on every single page, it makes a lot of sense to have that one JavaScript file that will work across all of the pages. But in this case, the create post has nothing to do with the code that's going to run on the index, right? And so it makes more sense to split that out into separate files. So there's no one, like, this is de facto the better way of doing it. In fact, there are some people that won't even make a separate JavaScript file for every page. They'll just use a script tag right inside of their HTML and put their JavaScript in that. And that's totally fine if you're only writing 5 or 10 lines of JavaScript. But if you're writing 50 lines of JavaScript, now that's going to be better to move it out into an external file. So it really is dependent on kind of how your brain works and how much you're putting into the file. Blush, what's up?
I have 2 questions. First is, can we use like 2 CSS files? For example, one for the entire website to brand the footer and header and all that, and the second one for
Individual pages? Yes, you absolutely can. There is no limit to the number of CSS files you can have.
And second question is, with that, again, with that post string argument in there, does that mean like post is the key and the value is the entire object, which is which has been converted to a string now?
Correct. Yes. So we don't have to call it post. We could call it like content if we wanted to. And then over in our, you don't have to follow this, but over in our browser, when we get the item out, we have to call that item content here to see, it would help if I made the new post and saved it in there. Content, content, content. Now in our console, when we get the content, that comes out. So it's basically the name of the variable in local storage that we're saving is the first parameter. And then we use that same name out here to get that item out. So post just happens to line up with the name of the object that I created. And normally your variable name will line up with whatever key you're storing it into. But it doesn't really matter what you store it as long as you give it some name so that you can pull it back out.
And this entire new object is stored in the local storage in like cache or something?
Local storage is kind of like its own little section of the browser that most browsers now support, but it's kind of like the cache. Local storage will persist. So if you close the tab and come back to it a couple days later, that content will still be in local storage, but as the name implies, it is local, right? So if you load this page on someone else's computer, their local storage of your website would be empty and there wouldn't be anything in it.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep. Sequoia, what's up?
All right, I have two questions. So the first question I had was, whenever we like do this form, do we have to put the window local storage get item in before in our console before we fill out the form?
You
Because
do
I
not.
so I just did it and like I pushed like create and it's saying the value with key width is invalid and has been ignored. So I'm not-
Share your screen. Let's take a look. It's out of the way. Let me request remote. Let me go new post, post a string, stringify. In your new post page, you link to new post.js. Value date, stringify set. And then on your you are in Chrome.
Mhm.
Can you drag that window over to this monitor?
The one with the post blog or the
The blog, yeah. Yep. Okay. So let me pop open our inspect. And can you drag that over as well? Okay. So here is where we want to check to see what's going on in our local storage. So if I get item post, there's the post that you just created.
so when I click get post, that wasn't short. So you wow, that's crazy. Because when I just clicked it, when I did the thing and just clicked that, only thing that came up was the value, this value part came up. This stuff did not come up. it's-
The value for key width is invalid and has been ignored. You've got something wrong in your HTML. You're using value. I don't know what's causing that. The value double arrow. Okay, can we find a double arrow anywhere? I don't exactly know what's causing that. It's in yellow instead of red, which I know sounds really dumb, but that just means it's a warning. But what we have to do is we have to make the new post first, and that's what's putting the item in local storage. And now that it's in local storage, when we're back on the home page, we can get it out in our console. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah.
So this line of code wouldn't work unless we had created this new post.
Okay. Alrighty. And my next question is, so I'm just trying to tie in how we created a new JavaScript.
File?
Yes. So if we're doing like say a website with a nav bar, do we have to do, since we're gonna do multiple pages for that, what we have to do, is it best practice to do separate JS pages for each of those?
So this answer will change a little bit when we get into React, because React will allow us to reuse components across multiple pages. But it would be common to see something like app.js or script.js, where you would put that navbar code in because it is on every page. And then if that page is using a lot of JavaScript, making a second file for that particular page that only that JavaScript would go in. And then you have two script source tags, one for the app.js or the script.js that applies to every page, like the navbar code, and then another one for the page specific information.
Alrighty, thank you.
No problem. Jen, what's up?
So, am I supposed to be getting an uncaught syntax error when
You
I
most
do the
certainly are not.
window local storage?
Share the screen. Let's take a look. Do you have a capital S in storage?
Yeah.
Okay, share screen. So post. You are missing a closing quote in your console.
No.
So just hit the up arrow. The console works just like the terminal. Click down in like that white area down there, and now hit up. And then you can throw in your closing quote and hit enter. And there's your post.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, unexpected token usually means it's missing like a closing quote or a closing curly brace for an object or a closing square bracket for an array or anything like that.
I thought it was going to be nice and finish the quotes for me.
Oh no, why would it do that? All right, anyone else need help? Okay, so now we're gonna do the post won't update in the window until you link it back to the HTML. Yes, this set item is what is updating the item in storage. Now what we need to do is we've proven that we can get that item out of storage by using this line of code. But we wanted to actually do that, right? We don't want to just test it in the browser. We want to say, hey, when this index.html loads, go into local storage, get this item out, and put that mofo up in our HTML. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to say const post equals window.local storage.get item post. And I'm going to just console log out my post to make sure it works. So I console log out the post, and here is my post. So I'm like, all right, now I just got to use that, right? So I'm going to say, all right, go up in my index.html and go find my ID of posts. So I'm going to say const posts div equals document get element by ID. Hopefully you're getting sick of that by now. Posts. And what do I want to put inside my posts div? And notice I use backticks there and not quotes. Well, we don't need to reinvent the wheel here. We already have all of this HTML that shows our posts up beautifully. We can take this entire div class col4. I'm going to click on that div and find out where that closing div is, right? So this div and this line up. So I'm going to take that entire div and copy it. Then I'm going to go back to my new to my index.js, which I somehow closed accidentally. And what do I want to put inside my post div? I want to put in all of this HTML that I just copied from up here. Please, 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 for the love of God, click on the opening div for the col4 and make sure you're highlighting down all the way down to that closing div. The div that we need to copy is that entire col4, because for every post is going to get their own col. And I am going to say, hey, the post div inner HTML, I forgot to do my period inner HTML here, is equal to this new template literal. And because it's a template literal, I can do something really cool. I can take out my first post as the card title, and I can put in my post. Where's my post coming from? My local storage dot title. And then I'm going to say, oh, author, I can handle that. I'm going to do my $sign and my curly braces and say post dot author. And then my little p tag, this is cool. I can do my post dot content. So I go ahead and save that, and I get undefined by undefined, undefined. That's not what I want. I'm going to give you guys a minute to catch up on that.
Is that because you have to pull all these back again in the new JS file? Like all that elements.title.value?
No. No. Different reason for it. What did we say local storage has to store the content in? What data type?
String.
A string. Well, we know that we can't just say .title.author.content in a string. And Jenny, you're Kenny, Kenny, you're right. It is JSON, and JSON is like a very specific type of string. Sorry, I read JSON and any at the same time, and you got Jenny. Totally my bad. So you get the string is actually JSON. All JSON notations are a string. But we know we can't just do .title and .author and .content. Dot notation is only for objects. So it's like, okay, well, if we can convert an object to a string, it makes sense that we can convert a string to an object. That is a concept called parsing. So in order to parse that out, I'm going to say post JSON, because that's coming out as the string. Now the post itself, we are going to convert by parsing the JSON into our object. So as soon as I hit save on that, look at what I get back. Some fancy title by the king and some really fancy content. So I'm going to pause there because we did a lot of code. I'm actually going to start a poll just to make sure that you guys all have enough time to catch up. If you do have it working, go back through, review it, make sure you understand it. If you don't have it working, keep working on it and raise your hand if you need help. And if you're still working on it, don't vote in the poll. Kenny, what's up?
Yeah, I'm having issues saying on uncut type error. JSON that parcel is not a function. I'll share my screen.
I don't know what parcel is. I only know what parsing is.
Parsing.
P-A-R-S-E, no L at the end. There you go. We're all caught up.
Wow.
That was an easy one. Corwin, what's up?
I feel like, I don't know, somewhere along the line I lost you.
Okay.
But over,
Oh, you just muted yourself.
my bad. So I had a console logging out for a second, and then I deleted something. I don't know what I deleted.
Share screen.
I did undo a couple times, and I kind of just went back to normal. So I just been catching up. I got you. Let me go to my code.
You shared your the screen with your stickies on it. I don't know if that's the one you meant to share. Okay, so let me request remote. And you've got your template literal going on down here. I renamed this post to post JSON so that we could separate out what was coming out of local storage compared to what's getting parsed. And then all of this actually looks right. So if we save and we head back to your home page, is that what you typed in?
It was not.
Okay, so let's take a
forgot what I
look
typed in.
at.
Like I said, I started doing it over, so I didn't type anything yet. It was just I
Okay,
didn't
so
get
let's
the console
try
logged out.
new post, title, content, author, create post. All right, so let's just take a quick look at your new post. Does all of the work, it stringifies it, and it stores it in local storage. So let's just make sure that's working. Let's debug and say window local storage, get item, get the post out, and we get object. So that is because
That's what I was getting stuck at.
that is probably because your new post.html, nope. All right, you've got me confused officially. Create post.
Aha.
Wait,
Ah.
I see a typo.
Uh-oh.
I saw somewhere
Oh.
work at post. Where were you? New post.html? Is that source? It's not the new post.js?
Unfortunately, because it's a lowercase here, it matches the lowercase here.
Oh, I thought that was a problem. Sorry.
There's a good guess.
I would have been happy. It's like,
Index, new post. Oh, we don't get the item in the new post. We set the item in the new post so that we can get it on our homepage. Had me there
Oh,
for a
no, that-
second. Title, content, author, create post. And then in our console, we get the item post. Oh, come on.
aha. Okay. I don't know what
Um,
I don't know what I did in here.
Console log, post the string. Oh, I also noticed you're on 5502 and this is on
Oh.
5501.
Interesting. Let me try
So
to
I'm gonna just close this one so we aren't in the wrong one and restart it from here. And I've got a good feeling that's gonna fix it. Title, content, author, create post, title, content, author. You're good to go.
wow. Thank you.
No problem. Goggin, what's up?
You're gonna hate me, but all the posts disappear. Like I only get one post and say one.
That's what it should be doing. The only post we should see is the post that we have created.
Oh, okay. But then why the middle one is undefined? Like I see A and C, I don't see B.
So make sure that your object that you're storing it in is using the same key as the form and as your homepage.
But then also it changes form, like it's deformed now. Let me just show
Yep,
you.
share your screen.
I don't know why. Like it's like this now.
Okay, so let me request remote. So in your new post.js, title content author, title content author is not spelled right.
Okay.
So that's going to cause your undefined issue. So let's do the new post A, B, and C, and create post, and now we get A, C, B, but that's okay, that's, you know.
Yeah.
Okay, and now why it's deformed is I said, remember when you're copying and pasting to make sure that your divs line up. What
Yeah.
you've got on your index.html is 2 div class col4s.
Oh, okay.
So if we take that out, now you're back in business.
So why is it like up and down? So I just have to change the way they are written.
Yeah, because if you filled this out and actually said
Okay.
like title of post,
Okay.
content goes here, and Shakespeare. I totally spelled that wrong. S is Shakes.
It's so hard.
SPEARE. Let's just think that's right. Now you get title of post Shakespeare and content goes here.
All right, I'll change it.
I don't know why I picked the hardest author to spell, but you know.
Right, Dante is easy.
Brandy, what's up?
Okay, my posts are saying everything says undefined.
Okay. Share screen. We need to make sure that we're stringifying when we put it into local storage and parsing it when we bring it out of local storage. So take me to your new post.js first. And here you're stringifying the post, right? Post is string and that's what you're setting in. So that's good. Let's see about when we pull it out. So let's go to the index.js. And here we aren't parsing it. So compare my line 2 to your missing line 2. What I did is I renamed line 1 to say post JSON. And then on line 2, I use that JSON to parse it back out into the object.
So now it should be fine?
Yep.
Yes, it is. Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem. Important to stay up with all of these questions, right? Because all of these debugging things are steps that you will have to debug when you are doing projects on your own. So even though it's painful to watch everyone else get their projects fixed, it's important to see how many different places it can go wrong and how I go about fixing that problem. Danny, go ahead.
Okay, so I just don't know what is going on right now. So what is it supposed to say in my console?
It shouldn't really have anything in the console, or if it does, it should be the post that you had created.
Okay, so it's all out on mine. So I believe I'm fine now. Then I must have fixed my problem, because at first it said I had a uncaught reference error, but then I restarted it and it shows my window log storage that, get item post, and then just shows what I wrote in my little post.
Yeah, if what you put in your form is showing up in the card in the HTML, you're all caught up and good to go.
Okay, thank you so much, Matt.
Yep. Sequota, what's up?
So I filled out the new post, right? And I see it in my console, but I don't see it. Like, is my first post supposed to change?
In the HTML.
So I'm saying on like when the web, is that supposed to
Yes.
change? Okay. I'm
Now,
not
we have not tackled multiple posts yet, but whatever you type into the form, when you hit the submit button, it should be showing up on your homepage. If it's not, share your screen.
So I'm gonna drag my stuff.
Yep.
Back up. So I'm doing like flower.
Yep. Okay. So you're missing something. So the first place I start debugging, other than requesting remote access, is I head to the console, because we're doing stuff in JavaScript and the Java. Oh, go ahead. Sorry. the JavaScript is telling us the error, and not only is it telling us the error, it's telling us exactly where the error is. So it's saying line 6. So if we go look at your line 6, it says document get element by ID post-div, and then set the inner HTML on that, right? Well, the problem isn't in your inner HTML. The problem is actually up here, because it's saying cannot set properties of null. Well, inner HTML is the property. It's saying this is null. Well, why is this null? We're getting the element by ID posts. But look at what your ID is. It is post. So if
Okay,
we throw an S on that, now there's your post.
okay, thank you.
No problem. Taylor, you're up.
I know. All right, so my first error, I believe, is telling me that JSON.parse is not a function.
Is
On line
JSON
2.
in all capitals?
JSON is in all capitals.
Okay, share screen.
Alrighty.
Jen, I see your question. I'll come to you after I get through all the hands.
Okay, where's my desktop one?
Okay, and so it's saying JSON. What's
I
your
can
error? Oh,
can bring that
you
over.
parse is spelled with an S, not a C.
You're kidding. Oh my God, it was so small. I knew it was staring at me this whole time. Okay.
The only reason I can do that so quickly is because I'm so used to those error messages, right? So where the error message is oftentimes more helpful than the error itself.
Okay, now it's saying something on line 6.
It is probably the same issue that Sequota just had. Scroll up in your index.html and make sure that your div with all the posts in it has an ID of posts on it.
I actually forgot to do the inner.html.
Oh,
I was
that
too
will
caught
do
up
it too.
in everything else. All right, everything is perfect. Thank you.
No problem. Danny, you're up.
Oh my God, you stupid.
Okay, so I thought it was 6, but I'm not, so I'm gonna share my screen.
Go for it.
And the error it's saying is uncaught reference error post div is not defined and index JS 6, .1.
It is not. What is the name of the first variable on line 6?
Oh, post div.
Yep. And where do we
Dot inner.
define posts div?
I don't know. I'm
Look at
so
your
lost
code.
right now. I'm like,
What?
where did we do that?
Yep. We use posts div on line 6. Where do we do that in our HTML? I'm sorry, in our JavaScript. Where in our JavaScript do we say, hey, posts div is equal to this thing?
I'll be honest, I'm so lost right now. My head is like swimming.
Okay, so look, we can't just use this thing called posts div, right? We've got to
Right.
tell it what posts div is. Just looking at your JavaScript, only the first 6 lines of the JavaScript. Where do we
Yeah, I
tell it
don't-
what posts div is?
I don't have it anywhere, right? It's right above it, correct?
Yep. And what is right above it?
Oh, I don't have the S.
Mm-hmm.
Work my life. Thank you.
So I know I'm being dickish there, but that's to push you to go, well, what do you mean it's not defined? I'm defining it on the line right above it. Oh, I forgot the S, right?
Okay.
It's
yeah.
not, it's taking it a step further and being like, I have defined it. Where did I define it? And once you know where you've defined it, it becomes much easier to find why it's giving you that error.
Okay, thank you. I was just like, oh, I couldn't figure it out. Thank you so much.
And you did know the answer, right? Don't just go, I don't know, I'm lost. You're not lost. It's like, all right, where's post div? I just made that somewhere. Oh, that's the line right above it.
All right, thank you so much, Max.
Yep. Goggin, what's up?
I didn't know I was next. All right. I don't understand the conspos JSON parse. What is that? Like, what does it do? Like that
It's the
part I-
exact opposite of what stringify does. So stringify turns an object into a string, parse, and then the whole thing of parsing is turning a string into another data type. In this case, it happens to be an object.
So what does that mean? Parse. What does it mean something?
Parse means take one data format and convert it to another more structured data format.
Oh, okay. I'm gonna write that down.
Let me
Wait.
get the official the JSON.parse method parses a JSON string constructing the JavaScript value or object described by the string. And then the rest of it doesn't really matter. But yes, parsing is basically the opposite of stringifying. It is taking the string and converting it back into the data format.
So we are telling, so here, just like a little rundown here. So we are telling him to get from the local storage, get the post object.
Yep.
And then translate it to like into JSON, like translate it back to the different object.
Be careful. JSON is always a string. When we parse the JSON, it comes back out as an object. So it's like a 4-step thing. So
Okay.
what we do is before we put it into our local storage, we take our object and we make it a string. Now, according to the computer, when that goes in local storage, it's a string. So that when we pull it out of local storage here, it is still a string. It is still JSON. So what we use is JSON.parse to parse the string back out into an object. And we can prove that's working because if we log out both the post JSON and the post, look at what comes out in our console. The first thing is an object that we can expand and we can work with all of that. But notice what's going on with this second one. It's in quotes. So this, even though the data looks identical in it, the data types are different. And to prove that, we can actually use a command called type of. And you can see the first one is an object and the second one is a string. Why? Because this is what's coming out of the local storage, which is always a string. And this is after we parsed it from the string back to the object.
Okay. Yep. No, that makes sense now. I was just confused there a little bit.
Yeah, good question.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Jen, to your question, and Shannon also had a question on that. What happened? We have 3 different cards up here, right? My first post and the card title. Whenever we use .inner HTML, we overwrite what is already in our HTML. We say, screw it, we don't need you anymore. This is the new HTML that we would like to show up in there. Because of that, all of this HTML can actually now be deleted. And this is the most painful part of programming, is that we're in here and it's like, oh, this entire div, notice that my posts have to remain. I still need a place to put those columns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on my div posts and I'm going to go all the way down and I'm going to find where that closing div is. And then I'm going to go in and delete all of these lines of code that we created. Why? Because we don't need them anymore. Our JavaScript is actually generating out all of the HTML for us. So I don't need any of that HTML in my HTML. My JavaScript is making the HTML for me. Shay, I'm curious, what does parsing mean for MMOs? While we're waiting on that, Palash, make sure that you don't have an image tag in your JavaScript. We deleted that out. It came with the Bootstrap card, but because our posts don't have images on it, it's probably giving you an error. So just take out wherever that IMG tag is, and that should get rid of your error in the console.
Can I ask you one more question?
Shoot.
So how many of these stringified objects can we put in the local storage? Like more than one? Or if we do that, like, do we have to declare them and name them in our JS file?
There's a technical answer, and then there's the answer that's the next thing we're working on. The technical answer is that there is a limit. Everything in local storage always has to be a string, but it is up to the browser to enforce a limit of how big your local storage can be. So it's usually up to 4 megabytes, I believe. But there are ways of requesting more storage from the browser. I would never recommend keeping more than 4 megabytes in local storage, because there's always the chance that someone clears their cache or resets the storage information on your site, and then you lose all of that information. So while local storage is persistent-ish, meaning that if you close the browser and reopen it, it's most likely going to be there, but you would never want to put your life's journal in local storage and just hope that it will be there when you reopen it. There's no way to like back it up or anything like that. So when we get into databases are not only super persistent in terms of saving and remembering the information, but it's also much easier to back them up. So there's a limit to how much you can put in it. There are ways to increase that limit. I have had up to 0.5 gigabyte of data in local storage, so that I could save it as a cache. In other words, it's a great way to speed up your website so that every time it is loading data, it doesn't have to go to the database. It can use a copy that it has already saved. So local storage can be very powerful, but you do have to watch on how much you put in it, and also know that local storage isn't permanent storage. It's just persistent-ish storage.
Perfect. Thank you. At some point, are we going to learn about like cookies during the curriculum, or should we like?
We will touch on cookies a tiny little bit when we get into full stack auth, but we only barely scratch the surface with that. Cookies are even less persistent than local storage, but they're in that same class, same category, I should say. And if you go to application in the inspect tools, you can actually see over here in the storage, there are a couple pieces of information, and I should show this for the whole class. If you open up local storage and click on our URL, you'll actually see the key and the value that we put in there. And then I also have this other one called content, because I was showing that off. So if you wanted to, you could actually click on that and delete all of that out of your local storage. This is a clear all button. I did not know that. So that's a clear all. And then over here on the left, you'll also notice there are things like session storage and your cookies. These are all of the different classes of storage that work under the hood of the browser.
Thank you.
Once we delete it from, yes, Sequoia, you don't have to delete it, but what you'll end up is having the risk of placeholder content show up on your website instead of the actual content that you want to show up. So it is common to get everything working in your HTML and then to put it into your JavaScript. And once it's working in your JavaScript, delete it out from there. Goggin, what's up?
So like you just cleared everything from the console. So does that mean it's deleted from the storage too?
I deleted it from the application tab. And so now when I refresh my page, I get nothing showing up there. Well, the problem that I'm now running into is it says cannot read properties of null reading title. That's because it's trying to access the local storage and there's nothing in the local storage. But we're going to solve that issue a different way than what you're probably thinking. So let's dive into that. So I go to my new post, right? And I say my first post, amazing content, King George, and I hit create post and it shows up and I'm like, all right, feeling good. 15 minutes before break starts. I feel like this project is in the bag. We're almost done with it. I go back to my new post and I'm like, yeah, baby, my second post. And I am feeling good. And I'm the one who wrote it. And I hit create post and my first post is gone. I'm like, oh, motherfucker, wanted both of them to be in there, right? So I go back here and I'm like, all right, what's going on in my new post? I put it all in an object and we said we liked objects because we can pull the value out by the key and the value and all of that. And I'm going to stringify it and there's nothing wrong with stringifying it. And what do? I set the item. Well, set item is just like inner HTML. It is going to overwrite whatever I have in my post with whatever the new post is. Well, I don't want it to do that. So Allie is a step ahead of us. That is exactly what we need to do. Instead of just making this object, we need to make an array of objects so that it can keep track of multiple posts. So in order to do that, what we're going to do is, it's kind of complicated because we can't just say, hey, go throw this new post on at the end. We need to get all of the existing posts, parse that out so that we have access to the array, put the new post in at the end, and then put it back into our local storage. So that's 4 steps. We need to get the existing posts from local storage. We need to convert the local storage string to an array. We need to add our new post object to the end of the array. And then finally, we need to convert the array back to a string. Sorry, 5 steps. And finally, we need to put the array back, the stringified array back into local storage. Okay. Makes sense. You're like, no idea how I would do all of that. Well, you kind of do. We've already done a lot of these steps. Get the existing posts from local storage. Window, or I'm going to say const posts string equals window local storage get my posts. And just to see if that's working, I am going to say const posts array equals JSON.stringify. JSON.parse, because it's a string coming out, right? We're parsing that string. So we are converting it from the string that's in storage back to the array. So I'm going to say posts string. Okay, now I'm going to console log my posts array. So I save that. I come back over and I need to disable my local storage and my redirect here because we're testing this code, right? This is way too much code to try and write all at once. So once I get my local storage in here and I parse out the string, console log it, but don't put anything else in storage, don't redirect me, I need to test that code out first. So I'm going to comment out both lines of code down at the bottom, because otherwise, when I get redirected back to the home page, I'm not going to be able to see what's going on in my posts array that logged out. So I'm going to comment out those last 2 lines so I don't get bounced around. So I'm going to go to my new post. I'm going to type in A, B, and C. I hit create post, and I get window.localstorage.get item. Sorry, my bad. Forgot the word item here. It's not just get, it's get item. So I type something else in, I hit create post, and now I get null. Okay. Null isn't really what I was going for there, is it? What was I supposed to get out? I was supposed to get my posts array out. Where did we tell it that posts is an array?
Nowhere.
Nowhere. It's almost like we need to say, if the posts don't exist, make a new empty array for them. But if they do exist, just use that as the array. What does that sound like to you guys? An if statement. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We are going to say, if there is not a posts string, then our posts are going to equal an empty array. Else, it is going to equal my JSON.parse. But I can't just use a new variable here. I haven't declared it. I can put a let in here or a constant here, but this is a certain block of code. The scope of this, when I come out of that if else statement, isn't going to let me access any of variables that I've created in here. Because of that, I need to come up before my if else and say let posts array exist. Now, if there isn't a posts string, if that post string is empty or doesn't exist, make my posts array an empty list. Otherwise, go take that string, parse it out, and give me my posts array. So I come down and I'm going to console log out my posts. Oh, I already am. I'm going to console log out my posts array. I save, I come over, I do A, B, and C. And when I hit create, now look what I have. I do have my empty array. Okay. So we actually took care of this already. Convert the local storage string to an array. We did that right here. But we ran into another step that says if the posts have not been created yet, make a new empty array. Now we need to add our post object to the end of the array. That's going to be a posts array dot push. Push adds to the end of it our new post. We need to convert our posts new posts array back to a string with our stringify. And finally, we need to put the local storage, the item, back into local storage with our posts and our new posts array. And that was a lot of JavaScript. I'll give you guys time to catch up there. You might be feeling out of breath, but read through this JavaScript now that you see the answer and you go, oh, well, that kind of makes sense, right? And we ran into this problem. We weren't expecting the posts to be empty, but the first time we tested it, oh, it makes sense. We're trying to add an item to a list and the list doesn't exist. So we need to tell the computer how to handle that. But we also need to tell the computer, hey, if the posts do exist, we can't just throw one onto the end of it. We've got to get out the string. We've got to parse it so we can work with that array. We can add the item on once it's in an array, but once it's in an array, we've got to stringify it back in before we put it back into the storage.
So Max, we added the new post array to our string of 5 statement for the local storage, right?
Mhm.
And now it's going to do the original thing for our first post and then now add multiple posts because we added the new post array.
So here's, you described everything that's happening on the new post page. But if I create my second post with more content and I'll say Dante and hit create post. Well, feeling good wasn't in there. Where did my Dante go? Well, I did all of this work in new post. Hold on, there's a way to debug. Let's go window local storage and get out my posts. .get item, sorry. Well, here's my second post and there's Dante. And if I create a new post and say third post and even more content and I don't know. Because you asked the question, you get to be an author. I create that. I'm still not showing up here. But if I come down and get my posts out, there's my other post. Okay. So it's going in local storage and everything looks right on this new post, but I can't see it here. Why? I have to tweak the inner HTML. Elaborate on that, Palash. What do you mean by tweak it? You're right.
Probably have a for loop that runs for every single array index
Bingo.
number.
I've got my post coming out of local storage, but look where I put it in new posts. I put it, sneaky little me, I slipped an S on that item, right? I'm not storing it in post. I'm now storing it in posts with an S. So when we come back from break, I'm going to have to modify my local storage to get out my posts. And then we're going to run into the same problem that Allie noticed of, well, there are multiple ones in there. So I can't just do one inner HTML. I need to loop over each individual post in order to make all of that show up in my inner HTML. Kenny, if you're getting a post string is not defined, work your way backwards. So we use post string here, but we define it here. So that's the same problem that Danny had of go back and figure out, hey, I'm using it here, but did I name it right up here? Yep. Not defined is usually a typo. Palash, what's up?
In your line 20th, in the else part of the if statement,
Yep.
so we do not declare post array is in an array there. We do it in the if statement. So if else is executed, like how does the code know to do what's on line 24? Like how does it know to push it if it does not know it's an array? See what I mean?
It does know it's an array because when we stringify it, so first time this runs through. Great question. I just want to elaborate on it. First time this comes through, we say, go to local storage, get the posts. And we come down and it's like, let post array. We haven't started that yet. We just made a variable. It has no type yet. Now, if the post string from local storage does not exist, it doesn't. This is the first time we're running this code. It's an empty array. So we ignore the else and it says post array dot push. Okay, dot push on an array. I know how to push to the end of the array. Throw that object in there. Now take that array, stringify it, and store it in this new posts array, and take that new posts array and put it into local storage. Great. First post is made. We come back in, we make our second post. We put it all in the object just like we did before. Now we go to local storage and we get out the posts item. That is now the post string. So it comes down and it says, does the post string not exist? No, it does exist this time because we just put that last item in it. So go ahead and parse that string out. Well, the parse is going to look at the item and go, does it start with a curly brace or does it start with a square bracket? Because JSON knows how to handle not only objects, but arrays, it is then going to go, oh, what I am parsing out of this is not an object. I'm actually parsing out an array. So that's what goes into posts array. Now, according to the computer, once this parse is done, an array is an array no matter where we got the data from. So it still knows how to push, it still knows how to stringify it, and then it's going to go ahead and set it back in.
Understood. Thank you.
Anyone else have? Oh, Jen, what's up?
Before I rip my hair out, I fixed like 4 different errors and now I have
Probably only 5.
one that I can't get.
Share screen and Siglet. If you guys have this working, you can go ahead and go on break, and I'll post a time in the chat once we get through everyone's code. New
I know it's
post
on
as
30,
a-
I just don't know what the fuck I'm doing.
line 30.
As it's not
new-
as array, is it? It's array, dipshit.
I can't even like belittle
I'm
you
sorry.
to figure out your own errors because you're beating me to it.
No, it's still there.
New posts.
No, yeah.
There you go.
Yay. Thank you.
Goggin, what's up?
So mine is not working for some reason. I mean, it's not showing nothing on the console as I'm gonna share my screen. So if we do this, if I put like new post, see.
Okay, so we haven't modified our homepage yet. Where you can see if it's working is go down into the console and do a window.localstorage.get item parentheses quotes posts.
Oh, that's what I gotta do. This one.
Yep. And it's posts with an S.
Oh.
Well, it should be. You didn't modify where you're setting it into in your new post page to use posts instead. Oh no, new posts. All right, that does look right. So in your browser, hit up to autocomplete the last one and then throw an S at the end of that. And enter. There you go. That's everything that you created.
Oh, is it working?
It's working. Yeah, you're caught up. When you come back from break, that's when we'll get it to show up on the homepage.
Perfect.
Corwin, what's up?
I allowed VS Code to spell check me. They mess up everything. I'm going back through. I just want to make sure that everything is like in the correct place when I go back and like fix all the letters. I'm gonna share it really quickly.
Go for it. Back from break at 7:30. Nope. Meant to send that to everyone. There we go. Okay, cannot access new post array before initialization on line 21. So that's where we're gonna head. And the new post array is stringifying the posts array. So hold on, you got a couple, let me request remote so we can get this straight. So we get the post string out from local storage, right? God, I hate Zoom sometimes. Okay. Okay, so we get the post string out and we need a place to put it once the if statement is done. So we're going to call that posts array. Now we use that posts array to either start it out as blank or to post out the post string into an array. Once we have that array, we add in the new post that we created. Then we take that array and stringify it into our new post array. And once it is stringified, we put it in back to local storage. So it's confusing because we've got posts array and new posts array, but we don't want to intermix those two. So go ahead and give that a try, see if that fixes it. And that should be fine. Down here, we can check it because we can do window, local storage, get item, and get our posts. And nope, that did not work because we set it into posts with an S because we're getting multiple ones now. So let's try that again. A, B, C, create. We check our posts. There is our item, and now we see it in an array. So you are all caught up and good to go. Last
Max,
call. Yes.
yeah, so as you know, I was at work, but following.
Yep.
I feel like I did something wrong. 1 second. Oh, it's me. I'm like, wait, hold on, am I on there? Okay. There we go. Okay. So I have everything here, but when I go live on it,
So
I don't have the bootstrap.
that is kind of okay because we're leaving it in a broken spot before class. Or before break. What we should be able to do is create something in here and hit create post.
Which
and
I
that should be taking us back to the home page.
So sorry.
You've got your create post in here, and in your new post, you're linking to it, and you're doing new posts, but you've got an S in your file name.
To go back to the main page.
Yep, you've got an S in there, so it wasn't linking right. So let's try this. Create post. Now it took us back to the home page, which is good. And now if we go to the console and we say window, local storage, get item, posts, and I hit enter, our post comes out, so you're all caught up.
Okay, thank you.
Next step is to say, hey, we only made one post come out, but now that we've got multiple posts, how do we modify our JavaScript to generate the HTML properly? And that's what's going to make it show up on the homepage, right?
Oh, okay, very good. Thank you.
No problem. Last call for questions. Okay, so you have to break. We ran into that with our HTML, right? We got all of our HTML written, and that didn't go to waste, even though we deleted it all. We used all of that in our JavaScript to make that the post show up dynamically, right? Based off of all of that content. So it is common to have to go back through to scrap different pieces of it, but now we've got it all set up in the array. now we have to just make it, make those changes. So it's not just on the new post, it's also on that home page that is reading out all of that data. So before we dive into that, did anyone have any questions that came up over break? Any code that's not working, anything there before we keep going? Goggin, what's up?
So I was reading through the code, and I only thing that I don't get about this is like the if statement. Like I understand the post string part, but after that, what happens after that?
So the whole point of the if statement is to handle what's going on the very first time that we try to make a new post, right? So we get this item out of local storage, and the first time that item comes out of local storage, there's not going to be anything in it because it's the first time we've used this website, right? And so what the if statement is saying is if there is not anything in that string, go make a new empty array. If there is something in the string, use whatever's in that string to convert the string using JavaScript object notation by parsing it into an array. Once we get that array, doesn't matter if that array is blank or if it has all the other posts that came out of local storage, we take the post that we created right up here and we push it on to the end of the array that we got out from our if or else statement. Once we do that, we can't put it back into local storage as an array. We have to put it back in using the JavaScript object notation. So we stringify it. That's what makes our new post array as a string, and that's what we put into local storage.
Okay. Yep.
Is there a specific section of that that would be helpful to re-review?
No, the only thing was the else part, right? I got like, we need to make an empty array, so we can put that into an actual array. But I didn't got the else part, but now I get it now. What is actually doing it?
Yeah, it's saying, all right, well, if it does exist, right? If there are posts in the string that are coming out from local storage, it's still a string. So we use parse to convert that into an array or an object.
So the push, the dot push is basically pushing everything together at the end.
It's taking the new post that we created in this object and adding that new object pushed on to the end of the array.
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? It's a let because we need to change it. If we make it a const, we then can't put a blank array in it or the parse. So we have to make it be a let because we're going to change the entire value of it further down in the if statement. And in general, we try to use consts when we can so that the memory doesn't get updated. But in this case, we do need to be able to change the value of that down the road. So we have to declare it outside of the if statement so we can access it after the if statement is done. All right, we ready? All right, so we're going to go to our index.js. And we are already going into our local storage, but we updated something in our local storage. We have to be careful on our variable names. I know the S trips you guys up a lot, but it is important to be very semantic with our variable names, right? So we're not just getting the post, we're getting the posts. Why? Because I modified my set item to use the S right there. We're putting it in posts when we make a new post, and because of that, we have to get all of the posts from local storage. The good news is parse is smart enough to know that this is now an array of objects. It's not just the object itself. But what we are going to do is rename our post to say posts. Then, just to make sure all of that's working, I'm going to console log out my posts, And I do have an error here, but if we put that error on hold, look at what came out right above it. Square braces right here and here mean it's an array. And if we pop that open, we can see I have two different posts inside of that array. Okay. Well, it's an array. And if you guys have taken your quiz from last week, you know the way that we need to process an array. I don't know why I always get the hiccups. The way we have to process an array is a for loop or some kind of loop. So we're going to say for const post of posts. And I know this is confusing because it's an S and not the S, but the general idea here is we're going to say go through every one of the posts, and as you get each individual one of those posts, give it to me as the individual post. That means that down here we can do something like post.title and see second post and third post. My first post, I didn't have the array working, so that's not in there, right? Or we can say post.author. And because there are two posts, I'm going to get the two authors that we created. Okay, so we're logging over each one of them. Now we can do something kind of cool. I'm going to take my get element by ID, and I'm going to move that up to above my for loop. We need to be able to get that post div so that we've got access to it. Now we're going to say let post, let's say let generated HTML equal an empty string. Started out as blank. And now every time that you get a new post, go get the generated HTML and add on to the end of it. We're going to do a plus equal there. We don't want to make the generated HTML equal this new post. We want to say every time that you're going over a new post, add on to the generated HTML. And what do we want to add on? We want to add on our whole template literal. And once you've taken care of that template literal, go ahead and take our generated HTML and shove it in the inner HTML of our posts div. If you guys are still struggling with the idea of template literals, think of them as Mad Libs, where you've got all of that paragraph of content and you've got the fill in the blanks where you've got to drop in the words. The fill in the blanks are wherever you see the $ curly braces. That's what you're dropping into those blanks. So with template literal and string concatenation, the exact same thing, just template literal syntax tends to be a little bit easier to write in our content. So I save that, I come back over and look at what is showing up in my page.
Why do I have 4 of them?
Because you've created 4 different posts.
Oh, that's cool. How you delete them?
We don't have that ability yet.
Oh, that's cool. I'm surprised.
Taylor, go ahead and share your screen. Let's take a look. This is the really depressing moment where it all really works well, or it all really does not work at all. So the first thing I want to check, let me request remote. You do your generated HTML, you put your generated HTML back in, you are getting all of the posts from local storage. Did that fix it?
Okay. I didn't realize you changed that before. So save. It did not change anything on my display.
Okay, so I want to check.
So hold on.
Yep.
Bring this in.
Perfect. So, okay. So I'm going to go to your new post, and you are putting it in posts. So now I want to see what's happening under the hood. So I'm going to go to the console, and it's posts is not iterable. So that means that We are looping over all of the posts. Where did we define our posts? We define it up here.
Okay.
So this is a good, now I have to make an example out of you. What is lining up here? If I take my, you know what, I'm going to do it on my screen just so it's a little bit easier. You stop you and restart me, and let's line some stuff up here, right? So when we take we do all of this work for the posts array, right? We push in our new post, we take that posts array and we convert it into our new posts array that's a string. We take our new posts array and we put that into local storage under the key of posts. Okay, where do we use that key? We use that in our local storage to get out our posts, and we store that whole thing in our post JSON. Now our post JSON gets parsed out and into a regular array into our posts. We then take these posts and loop over each of them to get each individual post. All of that is going to generate all of this HTML for each one of them and add on, which is why we've got the add symbol there, to our generated HTML. After it does all of that HTML, what it's going to do is trickle down. All of the HTML is going to be in there, put that in the inner HTML of our posts div. Where's our post div coming from? That is coming from up here. This is when it is worth it to have a printer, because we've got so many different variables here and they all have posts in the name of them. And it's like too many posts. Like what are all of these variables? But each one of those variables are uniquely named. Now, if you're looking at that and you're like, Max, posts is a stupid name. If that makes a lot more sense to me if I called that the list of all of my posts coming from local storage. Great. Go rename all of your variables that. I don't care, right? And the computer doesn't care either. What matters is, hey, do I understand how this code is flowing? Can I draw those lines and understand what that variable is referencing? And can I tell the difference between posts, post div, post JSON? We've got a lot of different formats flying around here between our JSONs and our strings and our objects and our arrays, right? So keeping track of that and knowing that ultimately the post that we're looping over here is the exact same post object we created up here. Yes, it went through local storage. Yes, it got converted about 19 different times, but that post object flew through JSON, went through our local storage, made it to our home page, came out of local storage, got parsed back into an array. And once we loop through that array, we are getting this final post object that we started back with all the way at yesterday's class. And Shay, I'm glad the line drawing makes sense. Push yourself to do it yourself, right? Little fun fact for you guys. You can actually start a Zoom meeting with no one else in it, share your screen, and hit the little annotate button that I have, and you can draw on your screen the exact same way. That sounds crazy, but if you are someone who is not a printer and you like doing things all digitally, that can definitely help. Corwin, what's up?
I went through, made sure that I had S's on everything, but it says that my JSON is not defined. I'm gonna share it real quick.
Go for it. Post JSON is not defined. Index line 2. Okay, let's take a look at it.
So I came in here.
And you got an S on everything, right?
No. I think I have it as and everything now. I'm gonna try to. Oh, there it is. Never mind.
Okay, bye. Jillian, what's up?
So I just kind of had a syntax question. So for when you do this, you have like you create generated HTML and then you have postdiv.innerHTML equal generated HTML. Is it generally better to create a new variable for this sort of thing? Because like when I did it, I just did postdiv.innerHTML plus equals blah blah blah. Is that just a
Very
preference
good
thing?
question. And I've actually failed a technical interview, or not failed because of that reason, but got points taken off of a technical interview because I did that very same thing. I just put this in here. And you'll notice that if I just comment these out for now, that works, right? That does the same exact thing. This is considered bad form because while you think you're just accessing that post div, whenever you update this inner HTML, it is now going back to the document object model and re-rendering every new post every time that you add something to it. So the first time this runs, there are only, let's say there are 5 posts. It's going to show up the first post, and then the loop's going to run again, and it needs to make the first post and the second post show up. Then the loop's going to run again, and it's going to refresh the first and the second post, and then make the third one show up. So it is better to say, hey, store this in JavaScript, do all of our actions on this JavaScript string, and once all of that HTML is generated, now put it back into the inner HTML of the document object model thing that we collected out. And because of that, it will only render all of the posts once instead of rendering all the posts individually and every time that you add to it.
Oh, okay. Okay, that makes sense.
So it doesn't break it. And for a little site like this, it wouldn't really matter, but it is slightly more efficient to store it all in a string and put it all in at once, as opposed to making the document object model update it every single time the loop runs, which is not something that we perceive because that happens in milliseconds. But from an efficiency perspective, it does matter a little bit. Yeah. Sequoia, what's up?
Okay, so I just restarted my post, but nothing is showing up, and I got an error saying something was wrong with 2 spots on mine. Can I just let me do this real quick? Okay, so let me just put the other stuff over so you can see that when I share.
Jen, that is exactly what you missed. We can only store strings in local storage.
Okay.
And you'll find that that's pretty much the only reason why we use JSON is because the internet turns out can only transmit strings. It can't transmit objects well. Okay, so new post array is not defined, new post 32. So let's go to new post JavaScript 32. Yep. And I'm going to request remote. And so we stringify here to our new posts array, and that's what we're trying to set into local storage.
Okay.
So, oh, sorry, I did not mean to do that on you. Bring that back up. Okay, so in here, I'm going to say, I don't know, 7, 8, 9, and hit create post. And we still don't have it, but this is because posts is not iterable. So we're going to head back to index.js, and we get out our post JSON posts. Well, that definitely should be iterable. What did we miss? When we stringify, we want to stringify the whole posts array, right? We're not just taking that one individual post, we're taking the array that all of the posts are now in. So I'm going to go I'm gonna clear your local storage so that there's nothing lingering in it. Now we're gonna make a new post and say 1, 2, 3, create post, and there it is. And we can create 4, 5, 6 and create post, and you are all caught up.
Thank you.
All right, Tara, you're on to the next good question. All right, why are they all 3 minutes ago? I certainly did not create that post 3 minutes ago. Well, yeah, we're on the right track. We've got this thing that says 3 minutes ago. If we take this out and put in another template literal $ curly braces, we can just throw our post.timestamp in there, right? Well, no, it's this weird format. There's got to be some way that we can convert that, right? Well, what we can do is we can convert it and we can say, hey, take this date. And if I save that, now I'm on the right track. I get all of this information out, but I'm like, whoa, way too much information there. All I want is the time. So what I do there is I add this thing in that says to locale time string. And if I save that, look at the magic of JavaScript. So this is pretty cool because we took the raw timestamp that was saved in there, we converted it to this date object, and because we are able to call these functions, all of these different functions that are built into the date object, we are able to use this to locale time string, and that is what put in our time for us.
That's amazing because I was trying it like 30,000 ways and I kept getting all these error messages. And then I'm like, okay, no, go back.
Okay, so we're on the right track. There is a problem that I need to fix here though, because we got our time working and I'm like, all right, all of this is good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to a website. And if I just do a search for lorem ipsum generator, that's going to pull it up. So I go into lorem ipsum. I say I want 5 paragraphs. I go ahead and hit generate. And here's all of this long text, right? This is just so I've got a placeholder that I'm working with. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. I'm going to go back in. And this is the curse of working with user-generated content. Sometimes users put in things that we are not expecting. Case in point with my boss, I made a feature. I thought he was going to make about 10 things using the feature. And he said, hey, it's getting really slow. Can you check into it? And I sign in. And what did he do? He created 1,000 different items of this thing. And I'm like, oh my God, I didn't think you were going to make 1,000 of these things. I thought you were going to make 10 of them. Well, we're going to run into that same problem. We're going to make a new post. And I'm going to call it little something to say. And I'm going to paste in my entire lorem ipsum. And then I'm going to say lorem was the author of this. I go ahead and I hit create post. And oh no. Oh no. Look at what happened to my beautiful, beautiful design. Well, I don't really want all of that to show up, right? I really only want maybe the first 100 characters to show up. And after that, I want them to click on that read more button and they're going to get more, they can read the whole post. We're going to tackle the read more button together, but in the next 4 minutes, I want you to use Google and Stack Overflow to modify one line of our code to only make the first 100 characters show up in our section right here. One line of code, open book, use Google, use Stack Overflow, and want only the first 100 characters of our content to show up here. Not something we've learned how to do in class, but we know where our template literal is to get that content to show up. Give that a try. You guys, 1 more minute to work on it and then give you guys the answers. You can use substring for your solution. You do not want to use truncate HTML, although it is hypothetically possible that you could. That's not how I would do it personally. You don't need an event listener because the user is not interacting with the page to make it shorter. Yes, substring is the way I would do it. So I want to show you, Jen asked, I'm confused as to where to put it. Well, that's a really important question, right? Because if we put it in the wrong spot, if we are in our new post.js and we say, hey, when I make the new post, just go in and substring out the content. Now, substring takes two properties. How do I know that? Because if I go to Google and say JavaScript, get first characters of string, it's going to give me a couple options. And at first I go, oh, char@, that looks good. The character at 0 and the character at 1. And then I'm like, oh, wait, this is only giving me one character. So even though Google said that this was the top result, they're not quite giving me the right answer because I need multiple characters of the string, right? So I'm scrolling down and look here, what's the next answer? Get n characters. N is a variable here, right? It's like saying let x variable, let x. And what they're showing me is the slice method. So let's try that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to my template literal. This is where all of that content is getting generated. If I put it up here when I create the post, that's going to say, hey, your post is great, but anything after 100 characters, we don't care about. Well, that's not the thing that we want. We don't want to cut off all 100 of those or anything over 100 characters. We only want to do that when it is on the home page. So if we did it here, anything over 100 characters would just get chopped off and we wouldn't have it in memory. Instead, what we want to do is say, hey, when we're generating out all of that HTML, go use the slice method and look at what is coming up in our VS Code. It's showing me that it needs two numbers to work. It needs the start number. Where does the string start? We 0 index. And where do we want to go to? We want to go to character 100 or 99 or whatever. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I go back into my blog and now look what I have. And we can kind of get creative here with a ternary operator. So I can put in another $ curly braces. And the cool thing about template literals is that we can evaluate JavaScript in there as well. So we can say if the post.content.length is greater than 100, then show ... else show nothing. And if I go ahead and save that, look what I have. I've got the ... happening here, but you'll notice I don't have the ... showing up in my other posts. Now, we had to do a little bit of work, right? We did get the right answer, but you may be saying, well, Max, I didn't use splice. I used substring. And because JavaScript is really freaking annoying, substring does the exact same thing. There are slight differences between slice and substring, none of which matter in the context of this problem. So we could use splice or we could use substring. Either one of them would work here. Now, if you're like, all right, the Google thing worked. I kind of get how you got to that answer. Is there some other way to do it? Well, this, my friends, is the future of programming. I can pull up ChatGPT, and all I need to do is say, how do I get the first 100 characters of a string in JavaScript? In JavaScript, you can extract the first 100 characters of string using the substring method. Here's an example of using the substring. This is the long string, and it's containing more than 100 characters. You could also use the array-like syntax to achieve the exact same result. And it shows us the slice, and it shows us the output. Both the substring and slice methods return a new string that consists of 100 of the characters starting from index 0, but not including the ending index, which is 100 in this case. No need to fear our new overlords. We can just embrace them and ask them the questions directly. Now, I will say you need to be careful with AI. The most dangerous thing about AI is that it thinks it's always right. There are times that it will generate out code for us, and the code is not anything, it's not even valid JavaScript. It won't even run. The problem with AI is that it doesn't know that it's wrong. All that it knows is that it came close to an answer, and that's the answer that it would give you. This exact code wouldn't directly work because we need to tell it, hey, what are we slicing out, the post.content? But both the substring method that they told us to use right here and the slice method, both of those would work in our code.
So mine is not working.
Go ahead, share screen.
All right, let's see.
Jen, that wouldn't work because you need your $ curly braces. That percent equals syntax, I believe, is a non-JavaScript programming language. Or if that does work, I would be very, very confused as to why that's working. But my guess is that percent equals is a different language. You have a period instead of a comma in your first slice, and you're missing a G in your length.
First slice, where is it? Right here?
0,100.
Oh, dummy me.
There you go.
All right. All of them are working.
All right. How are we feeling about that? Are we seeing, hey, we don't know how to do all of this stuff, but the little bit of Googling, include JavaScript in our query, check out ChatGPT, it just shows you guys that you don't need to know everything, right? We didn't cover substring in class. We didn't cover slice in class. If you're going through Free Code Camp and you got exposure to those, great. You might know the answer to that. I use Google every single day. I've been doing this for 10 years. I know a lot of freaking JavaScript. I still need to Google it. I Google substring all the time. I knew the answer was substring. I didn't know the differences between slice and substring, so I just looked that up. Oh, you guys were working on the answer. Now I know, right? I always have to look up, does it include the 100th number, the 100th letter, or does it not include the 100th letter? Should I put 0 and 99, or should I put 1 and 100? To look that up every single time. I don't have that in my brain. And if it mattered, I would spend a little bit more time and I would count out the letters. Maybe I would only do it up to 10. And I would go, all right, is the 10th letter included here for testing? That's what quality assurance gets into, right? How important is it that only 100 characters are showing up? But once we get those little concepts down, we can layer things in like ternaries here and really accomplish two things. Not only do we get only the first 100 characters, we also have this nice interface to say, heads up, we chopped off some of that text and you can read more about it with the ... How are we feeling? Feeling pretty good? All right, we got one more feature to accomplish tonight. We have created our cr, but not our ud. We have our create working. How does our create work? That's our new post button down here. This is creating. And we've got our first We are reading out all of this information and displaying it on our page. What can't we do? We can't update these posts. And we can't delete the posts. But before we can even get to update and delete, we've got one more problem in here. Where's the rest of my content? I wrote 5 beautiful paragraphs of text, and if I click this read more button, nothing happens. All right, well, I don't really want to create a page for my second post, my third post, and my fourth post. I want to be able to click the read more button and just magically be taken to my read page that automatically knows which one I clicked on and pulls that information up for me. That is what we are going to get started tonight. And so when we come back tomorrow, we can focus on finishing up that functionality and then working our way up to a login page so we can do our updates and our deletes. Okay, let's get started on that. I'm going to create a new page and I'm going to call this read.html. Do my exclamation point enter. I'm going to throw in my title, which is read more. I'm going to go back to my index.html and I'm going to go grab my bootstrap link. Copy that, come back over to my read, paste that in. I am going to come down to my div class body and I'm going to throw my container on this before I forget about it. And what do I want to show up here? I want maybe an H1 with, actually, let's do this. Let's say Max's blog. Let's make an H2 with my post title goes here. Let's throw an HR in there. And then in my P tag, I'm going to throw post content goes here. And save all of that. I come over, I click my read more button, nothing happens. Well, I'm going to go into my index.html and I don't even have a read more button anymore in my index.html. But it's still here because it's getting generated in my JavaScript. So sometimes when we're looking for code in someone else's code base, we have to remember that our JavaScript is often generating out dynamic HTML for us. So I'm going to change my href here to my read.html. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. I'm going to come back over here. I'm going to click my read more button. And now I get Max's blog, post title goes here, post content goes here. Pausing there, giving you guys a second to catch up. This is my new read.html created from scratch. I grab my bootstrap link. I put in a little template of what it should look like once I get the content dynamically loading. And then I went back to my index.html. And in my index.html, index.js, sorry, in my JavaScript, I updated that href to go to my read.html. And this is what the final version looks like when I click on any of my read more buttons.
How do we get back to our main page from there?
You either hit the back button or you add a href to go back to your index.html. Allie, what's up?
So if we wanted, like we can only, okay, how am I trying to word this? Okay, so if we wanted to like have the read more for each individual post, like will we have to create all those pages?
That is exactly what we are going to write JavaScript to avoid.
Okay.
And what we are not going to fully accomplish tonight, because this is going to blow your minds even more, and I feel like we've blown minds enough tonight. So we're just getting the infrastructure started so that tomorrow we've got all of this groundwork laid. All right. We are looking at our read page and we're like, all right, we've already solved this problem before. Let's not reinvent the wheel here. Where did we get our posts before to generate out some HTML? We did that in our index.js, but when we go through and we get these items from the posts, we don't need to loop through all of them. We only want to get that one specific one out that we're looking for. But this JavaScript, while it's a great reference, is going to be different enough from our index.js than it is on our read page, right? So instead, what we should do, because it's different, is create our read.js page. In our read.html, we need to throw in a script tag here with our src of the read.js. And where we are going to end tonight is go to our index.js and go take the work of getting the item from local storage and parse that out for us. So I'm going to go ahead and copy those first 2 lines, paste them in here, and console log out the posts. So on my if I'm on my read.html page, if I'm on my home page, I should be able to click on any of the read more buttons. That should take me to this final page. And on this page, we should have our 3 posts console logging out. It's all 3 of them. But tomorrow, when we wrap up this project, we're going to learn how we can filter or find the one post that we want and learn how we can pass information from our home page into our read page. So our read page can use that information, find the exact post we're looking for, and put that onto our blog. Once we get that done, we're going to learn how we can build a login page and mock up a basic password authentication system. And once we finish all of that up, if we have time, we'll make an admin page where we can delete posts. With all of that said, if you can see, if you've got your read page set up, if you've got your read.js set up, and you can see all of the post console logging out when you click the read more button, you are good to go. GTFO, I will see you tomorrow.
So I had a question. If we want to modify the buttons, like for example, like change the name on them, I tried to change the name, I couldn't do it.
Make sure you're doing it in your index.js because that's where we're generating all of that HTML.
Okay. I was doing it from the other. I don't know. All right.
Were the last 2 steps you just did and
read.js.
log posts to read.js?
Yeah.
Okay.
The first 2 lines just are direct copy from index.js. I threw a console login to make sure they're working, and then make sure you put your script tag in read.html to make sure that it runs. And they'll only show up in the console if you're on the read more page. Very rewarding as a teacher, by the way, to like pose the problem and to see you guys come up with a solution. So great work on like thinking through, oh, an array could solve this problem, or, oh, we got to go look up substring and remember how that works. So good work tonight. Being a step ahead before I can even teach it. You know what the next step is. That's all I've got tonight. So if you've got this working, feel free to peace out. Otherwise, I will stick around in case any other questions pop up.
You should be able to click on read more. That links you to this page, and then the
Just
return home
check in the
button, right?
console to make sure that your 3 posts are showing up. And if those are showing up, then you're caught up.
Because I do watch it either.
Yeah.
No, it's just like it's a dumb thing. So
There are like 10 of them.
it's usually
That's fine. You just created a bunch of posts. That's fine if there's more than 3.
So besides making the Visual Studio bigger, How the hell do you keep all these posts, like all the different pages neat? And like, because some of them I can't fit all on there and I can't figure out how to get to the next one.
You mean on this screen, there?
No, in the JS or in the Visual Studio. It's like I have so many pages open that like I tried separating the top ones up on top and then putting like 4 of them on the bottom, but when we have more open, how are we supposed to like?
I am very good about closing tabs. And so it's a little bit easier for me because I'm like, all right, I know why I'm done on the home page, or I know I'm done on the new post page. So like I can close out of new post. But it is very normal, just like in your browser, to have 10 tabs open. It's very normal to have 10 tabs open in your code editor. And then you just get good at closing out of ones that you're not using anymore. I like to separate it. So I usually have my HTML on the top and my JavaScript on the bottom. And then when I'm not working in the HTML, I just grab the bar here and drag it up so I can see more of the JavaScript. And then professionally, I use React. So React is like one big file that lets you intermix your JavaScript in your HTML. So that helps a little bit, but there's always a part of organization. And that's the hardest thing when you guys share your screen and you're like, all right, here's my code. And I'm like, everyone's got it laid out a little differently. That just comes down to a personal system.
All right.
If you think this is fun, wait until you get to week 24, where you're all working on your capstones and you all have written your code differently. And I have to like switch in my head between 19 different people's worth of projects to be like, wait, you're not using React. You did this in Java. Okay, hold on, vanilla JavaScript. I can do that. That's when it comes real fun.
So I had a question, like a general question.
Yeah.
You think React is gonna help us with more with the JS, like kind of like it's gonna help us get things done easily?
Yeah, React kind of, you won't read this in any of their documentation, but what React does is it makes it easier to build applications. So instead of just websites, which we can do with basic HTML and a little bit of JavaScript, where React excels is integrating data. And data is kind of that line between a website and a web app. So once you have to deal with data, that's when React comes in.
Got it.
And React will certainly help with that. Amberlynn, what's up?
I must have missed a step because
Okay.
mine looks terrible and it doesn't work for me.
Share screen, let's take a look.
Okay.
Jen, also
Yes,
make
ma'am.
sure that you don't have a style width equals like 18 REM or something like that on your cards. That could be causing the scroll issue that you may be running into.
Well, like I found a little scroll bar to move them side to side, but like I have 5 JS on the bottom plus the style and the readme.
Oh, gotcha.
And like it was scooting one of them over to where I couldn't see it. And I'm like, how do I get that back? But I found a little scroll bar. Thank you.
Yep. Post not iterable index JS line 6. Okay, so let's head to index JS line 6. And I don't see any problem there. So let me request remote. And 2 things I want to check. One, everything looks right here, right? Because you're getting the posts from the post JSON. You're getting the posts. So sometimes it's an issue on the new post. When we put in all of the new posts, we want to set it into the posts. So now that we are putting in multiple items, we want to put an S on that name. And now if we say new post and say 1, 2, and 3 and create, that should have taken us to our homepage, but let's just go to it. So everything's right in there. So now all we need to do is say window.location can only have one
Ah.
location. And so now if we do 4, 5, and 6 and create the post, you're good to go.
Okay.
And
Thank
then the
you.
read more button should take us. That's right. That's right. The only thing that you're missing is the bootstrap.
Okay. I did not put that in yet.
I'm gonna copy that and throw that up at the. Oh, no, you did put that in.
I don't think I put it in the
Oh.
new read HTML.
You're right. I was on the wrong one. Thank you. Like I'm losing my sanity. There you go. Now you're all caught up.
Thank you.
Oh yeah, I hate that little mini map, the preview of your code down that column. That thing drives me nuts. Yes, you can turn that off. Which is funny because I guess I did use it for a little bit, but then yeah, I turned that off. More screen space. Palosh, what's up?
So you don't have to answer it until tomorrow, obviously, but are we gonna do something like this? Since it's the entire thing is an object which has been stringified, is an array with objects inside.
Mhm.
Are we gonna do like add it in our inner HTML, add IDs which match the indexes of that array? And as we click on those read more buttons, depending on, is it the first post, second post, or depending on where it is inside the array, that's where it pulls all the
Very close.
Oh,
But we're not going to use indexes. And the reason we don't use indexes is what happens when you delete one of those posts. Well, you could shift the whole array over, but now all those indexes have changed. And so in general, while indexes can be used for IDs, they're one of the last resorts that we want to use, only because things get deleted and indexes change, right? So if you sent your mom one of your blog posts, right? And you're like, oh, go check out blog post number 2. And then I as the author, I'm like, no, I want to delete the first blog post. Well, now blog post 2 doesn't exist because 2 became index 1 and everything got shifted over. So those links break. So what we're going to do instead is we are going to use the
timestamps,
the timestamps. Yes. Which are, I mean, in general, the best ID is an ID that the database is generated for you because database is much better at keeping track of IDs. But yes, in this case, because we don't have a database, we're going to use the timestamps, which is why you may notice I used, instead of date.now, I used date.time because I wanted it in that millisecond format. So it was easier to find that millisecond format down the road. Maybe it's seconds. I can't remember in JavaScript. Either way. So that's what we're going to use as our ID. We're going to add into the ahref what we call a URL or a get param. So we know which one of the read more buttons we're clicking on. That time information is going to get passed into the read page. We're going to pull that out of the URL. We're going to find it in the array by using a filter algorithm. And then once we get that individual post, we're going to build the inner HTML from that object.
awesome, cool. I'll keep my mouth shut tomorrow.
All good. Last call for questions. All right. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you.